China Medu had waited her whole life for this. At just 24, she had faced more rejection and struggle than most people twice her age. She grew up in Enugu, sketching designs in the corners of old newspapers while helping her mother sell pepper in the market. By day, she sold handmade greeting cards and painted chairs. By night, she studied design tutorials on a cracked phone screen. So when she got the email saying she had been accepted into a top university in South Africa with a full scholarship for interior architecture, it felt like a miracle. Her hands shook as she told her family. Her mother cried. Her younger brother danced. Everyone was happy except Ndidiamaka. Ndidiamaka was her cousin, just a year older, and had always seen herself as the brilliant one. She had also applied for the same scholarship. When she didn't get it, she said it was unfair. "You got lucky," she told Chinanai, trying to smile. But Chinanai smiled back and replied, "I got blessed." There was tension in the air, but no one spoke on it. They assumed jealousy would fade. Chinanai was glowing with excitement. Her passport was stamped, her visa approved, and her flight booked. The red pouch holding her documents never left her sight. She even laid out her clothes for the journey, a crisp white blouse and blue jeans she had saved for over 6 months to buy. The whole house was buzzing with preparations. A small family dinner was planned. Prayers were said. The girl who once painted signs for roadside stalls was finally going to fly. But behind her joy, something was brewing. Ndidiamaka's smile didn't reach her eyes. As everyone cheered for Chinanai, she stood quietly, clapping softly. No one knew what was going on in her heart. But jealousy, when left unchecked, can do dangerous things. And the next 24 hours would prove that some wounds aren't caused by strangers, but by family. The night before Chinanai's flight, her family gathered in the small compound for a simple send-off dinner. Plastic chairs were set out, plates filled with jollof rice and fried plantains, and neighbors came to wish her well. Everyone was proud. Chinanai, who once painted on scrap wood, was finally taking a flight out of Nigeria for something big. She laughed with her brother, hugged her mother tightly, and thanked everyone for believing in her. But Ndidiamaka sat quietly in the corner, barely touching her food. Her eyes followed Chinanai's every move, her thoughts heavy with envy. When it was time to sleep, the family went to bed with hearts full of joy. Except Ndidiamaka. In the quiet of the night, Ndidiamaka tiptoed into the room where Chinanai kept her red pouch, the one holding her passport, visa, and flight documents. She had seen it earlier in the day when Chinanai showed it to their aunt. Carefully, she opened it. Her hands trembled, but her mind was made up. From her bag, she pulled out a fake ticket she had printed earlier from a free test booking site. It looked real enough. Without a sound, she replaced the real boarding pass with the fake one, zipped the pouch back, and placed it exactly as she found it. But that wasn't all. Back in her own room, Ndidiamaka opened her father's hidden envelope, the emergency savings he had kept for health issues. She didn't care. She used part of the money to book herself a standby ticket for the same airline, hoping to find a seat at the last minute. She told herself it was her chance now, that it was supposed to be her from the beginning. She deleted her browser history, folded the confirmation, and slid it into her handbag. As the night passed quietly, one girl dreamed of flying, while another had already stolen her wings. The next morning, Chinanai arrived at the airport full of hope and excitement. Her mother hugged her tightly before letting go. Her younger brother carried her bag, teasing her gently. "Big girl now," he said, smiling. She laughed, took her red pouch, and headed inside the terminal. Everything felt like a dream. She joined the queue at the check-in counter, passport in hand, heart beating fast. When it was her turn, she handed the documents to the airline attendant with a bright smile. But within seconds, that smile faded. The attendant frowned, scanned the ticket again, and looked up. "Ma'am, this is not a valid booking," she said calmly. Chinanai blinked. "What? No, that's not possible. Please check again." The woman checked the system twice. Still nothing. "Your name isn't on the flight manifest," she said. Panic crept into Chinanai's chest. She unzipped her pouch, pulling out the confirmation email on her phone. But the booking code didn't match anything in the system. Her hands started to shake. Her breathing became uneven. The noise of the airport faded as her thoughts raced. How could this be happening? She had triple-checked everything. Her dream couldn't end at a check-in counter. As she stood there, frozen and confused, tears filled her eyes. A man behind her asked her to move aside. She stepped back slowly, heartbroken. Meanwhile, just 3 gates away, Ndidiamaka sat by the window of a standby flight, dressed simply and keeping her head low. She clutched her backpack tightly, praying silently that no one would recognize her. Her name had been called last minute for a vacant seat, and she took it. She watched the runway with guilt in her chest, but told herself it was her turn. She didn't think about the pain she left behind. She only thought about getting away fast. While Chinanai stood in disbelief, Ndidiamaka was already boarding the flight meant for someone else. Chinanai walked back into the house with her head down and her steps heavy. Her bag dragged behind her, untouched. The same house that had been filled with laughter the night before now felt cold and silent. Her mother saw her first and rushed toward her. "What happened? Why are you back?" she asked, panicked. But Chinanai couldn't speak. Her lips trembled. Her voice refused to come out. Her younger brother, Kamsi, stepped in and grabbed the pouch from her hands, flipping through the documents. "What do you mean the flight wasn't real?" he asked, confused. Chinanai just shook her head and sat down slowly on the couch, numb and broken. She reached for her phone with shaky hands and called the scholarship office, her last hope. "Please," she begged. "I missed the flight because of a mix-up. Can I reschedule?" But the woman on the other end sounded firm. "We're sorry, Miss Madhu. The scholarship is time-sensitive. If you're not on that plane today, we cannot defer the funding." The line went silent. Chinanai dropped the phone and stared at the wall. Everything she had worked for, years of struggle, late nights, selling art in traffic, had vanished in a few minutes. Her mother broke into tears, wailing loudly. "God, why? After everything she's been through." Kamsi punched the wall, his knuckles turning red. "Who would do this to her?" he shouted. But Chinanai, she said nothing. She just sat there, staring at nothing, as if her soul had left her body. A deep silence filled her heart. The most painful part wasn't the lost flight or the missed opportunity. It was the betrayal. Someone had done this to her. Not a stranger, not fate, but someone close. And she didn't even know who. The red pouch sat beside her, zipped up and useless. The same pouch that once held her future now held nothing but a cruel trick. That evening, the house was still quiet. No one had eaten. Chinanai lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, too drained to even cry. Her mother prayed softly in the corner. Kamsi sat outside, scrolling through his phone, unable to stop thinking about what had happened. Then something caught his eye. On Instagram, Ndidiamaka had posted a blurry photo. It showed a lounge chair, part of a boarding gate, and a glimpse of an airplane through the window. The caption read, "About to change my life, fire airplane." Kamsi's eyebrows furrowed. That didn't make sense. She had told them she was in Onitsha, staying with their aunt for a week. He rushed inside and showed the post to Chinanai. Her heart dropped. She didn't speak, just stared at the photo. Her mind began racing. How could she be at an airport? What life is she changing? She whispered. It didn't sit right with her.
Hier gut twisted.
And then, like a light bulb, she remembered something. The cyber cafe. That's where she had printed her real flight ticket days ago. Maybe, just maybe. Without telling anyone, Chinanai left the house and walked to the cyber cafe 2 streets away. The owner, Mr. Afani, had always liked her. He remembered her well. "You came 2 days ago to print a booking, right?" he asked. She nodded quickly. "Is there any way I can check if someone else came after me that same day? Maybe later in the night." He looked at her face. Chinanai stared at the screen, frozen. There was no doubt. It was Ndidiamaka. The timestamp confirmed it. The same evening her red pouch had been moved. She watched as her cousin walked into the cyber cafe alone, looking around nervously, then went straight to the printing desk. She printed something, folded the papers quickly, and left. No hesitation, no shame. Chinanai's throat tightened. Her hands began to tremble, not with anger, but with deep, silent pain. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a decision, a planned betrayal. Ndidiamaka had looked her in the eye at dinner that night, laughed with everyone, and still did this. She walked home slowly, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her room, she didn't cry. She just sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall. Her mother came in and asked if she was okay. China nodded gently. "I'm fine," she whispered, even though her heart felt shattered. She looked at the red pouch beside her and whispered to herself, "She didn't just take my seat on the plane. She tried to steal my life." For a moment, she imagined confronting Didyamica, shouting, exposing her to the whole family. But then, she stopped. What would it change? Would it fix anything? Would it bring back the flight? The scholarship? The dream? No. So instead, she let out a deep sigh and said quietly, "Let karma do the talking." That night, while everyone slept, China stayed up. But not in pain, in planning. If one door had closed, she would find another. She pulled out her sketchpad, the same one she had used to design her first collection of furniture drawings. Her pencils were worn, but her spirit started to rise again. She wouldn't let this break her. Not completely. Not forever. If Didyamica wanted to take her chance abroad, then fine. But China would rise right where she was, and build something even stronger. 3 weeks passed slowly, but China stayed focused. She didn't speak about the betrayal anymore. Instead, she spent her days quietly sketching, refining her old designs, and helping her mother in the shop. Every night, she filled her notebook with colors and shapes, imagining homes she would one day design. Her dreams hadn't died. They were just waiting. What she didn't know was that her old art teacher, Mrs. Enkay, had been watching her silently. She believed in China's talent more than anyone and knew her time would still come. That week, Enugu buzzed with excitement. Folake Owolabi, one of Nigeria's most respected interior designers, was visiting for a community art program. She was searching for hidden talent, young creatives to join her new global collaboration focused on African-inspired home designs. Without telling China, Mrs. Enkay submitted a few of her students' works, including China's private sketches. On the day of the showcase, China followed her teacher to the venue, thinking they were just attending to observe. But when the judging began, and names were called, she was shocked to hear hers. "China Medu?" a voice said from the front. She stepped forward nervously, unsure of what was happening. Folake Owolabi stood there, flipping through China's pages. She looked up with a smile and asked, "Where have you been hiding?" China blinked, her voice soft. "Here, just trying not to disappear." Folake nodded. "Your eye for space, your color work, it's different. You don't belong in the background." Right there, in front of everyone, she was offered a remote contract to join the project. She would work from Nigeria, earn full pay, receive mentorship, and gain international exposure. For the first time in weeks, China smiled with real joy. Her dream hadn't ended, it had simply taken a different route. While someone tried to steal her future, something greater had been waiting to find her. In South Africa, things didn't go the way Didyamica imagined. At first, she felt like she had won. Sitting in a new country, surrounded by strangers, she convinced herself she deserved this fresh start. But on the first day of orientation, everything started to fall apart. University staff asked to see her original scholarship documents for final verification. Didyamica smiled nervously and handed over what she had, a copy of the acceptance letter she forged and a story she had rehearsed in her head. But it didn't take long for the truth to unravel. They couldn't find her name in the system. There was no record of her award, no official documents, and no match for her ID. She was quietly taken aside, questioned, and within an hour, asked to leave the premises. Her visa was flagged for possible fraud. She stood outside the campus gate, her small suitcase beside her, heart pounding. Reality sank in. This wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare of her own making. She tried to call home. Her hands shook as she dialed her father's number, but when he picked up, he didn't sound angry. He sounded broken. He had just found out what she had done with the savings and the truth about China's stolen ticket. "You've brought shame to this family," he said quietly before hanging up. No money, no help, no one to turn to. Didyamica sat alone on a bench outside the airport later that day, unsure of where to go. Her stomach was empty. Her eyes were red. Her phone battery was dying. For the first time, she thought of China, standing at the airport, confused, crushed, and it hit her like a punch to the chest. "I didn't just take her seat," she whispered to herself. I took her place. Karma didn't take long. It found her quickly, and it came without mercy. 6 months later, China and I stood in front of a glowing crowd at a Women in Design conference in Lagos. Her rise had been fast but well-earned. Since joining the design collaboration, her sketches had been featured in Elle Decoration Nigeria. Her furniture designs, inspired by traditional Igbo patterns, caught international attention. Brands began to notice her name. What once seemed like a closed door had led her straight into rooms she never imagined. Dressed in a simple but elegant outfit made by a local designer, China and I stood behind the podium, calm and radiant. As the cameras rolled and phones went up, she began her talk, not with bitterness, but with grace. She didn't mention names, didn't speak of betrayal, but everyone could feel the weight behind her words. Sometimes, she said gently, the flight you miss leads to a better journey, because destiny doesn't run on plane schedules, it runs on purpose. The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. People stood to their feet. Some wiped tears. Others nodded with admiration. China and I smiled humbly and stepped back, her heart full, not just with pride, but with peace. At the very back of the auditorium, behind the cameras and the applause, stood someone who almost didn't come, Amaka. She wore simple clothes and looked smaller than before, like life had pressed her down. She didn't clap. She didn't move. She just watched, her eyes wide and wet. She had seen the posters, heard the buzz, and knew she had to see it for herself. As China and I stood shining on stage, Amaka felt the weight of what she had done. For the first time, she truly understood that she hadn't just stolen a seat on a plane. She tried to steal a future that was never hers. And yet, here China and I was standing taller than ever. The shame hit harder than any punishment. That night, long after the lights faded and the crowd left, Amaka stood alone outside the event center. She had waited quietly in the shadows, unsure if she should even be there. Her clothes clung to her from the humidity, and her heart thudded with shame. Part of her wanted to run, but something deeper held her in place, the need to say the words she had swallowed for months. When China and I finally stepped out through the glass doors, still glowing from the evening's success, she stopped in her tracks. There, just a few feet away, stood the cousin who had once stolen her flight, her chance, her moment. Their eyes met. The silence between them was louder than any applause. Amaka stepped forward slowly, her voice almost breaking. I don't deserve anything. I just came to say sorry. China and I didn't speak at first. She just looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who once wore confidence now looked like a shadow of herself. Thin, tired, defeated. But China and I didn't see an enemy anymore. She saw a lesson, one she had already survived. Finally, she smiled, not out of pride, but from peace. You were right, she said softly. I got lucky, but not because I made that flight, because I learned how to rise without wings. She didn't wait for a reply. She didn't need one. With her head held high, China and I walked past her, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. She didn't carry bitterness, only strength. Her journey had shaped her into something deeper than success. It had made her unshakable. Amaka watched her go, unable to speak. She stood there for a long time, replaying those words again and again. And from that day forward, she never tried to steal someone else's path again. Some lessons break you first, but they never leave you.